At any rate, it's great to meet you, and you got a lot going on, and I would like to begin our journey because this obviously would have affected the way you did things 4 years
Yeah.
ago. We were trying to figure out this pandemic. When are we
Yeah.
going to get out of it? How is it going to affect us? How did you ultimately get through that time period, and how did it change the way that you do business?
Well, honestly, I was a massage therapist full time at that time. So my whole world changed. Like we were gradually watching, how we could practice because we are governed by a professional body. So I had to be held to different standards. And then we got told, Kate, as soon as your city is in a state of emergency, you're no longer allowed to practice. And as a massage therapist, I only got paid if I had clients. I worked for myself. And so then overnight, I had no income. I had all of my bills to still pay. And really, the only thing that actually got me through it is I had started a fitness journey in January. So everything kind of hit ahead mid March where I was. And that was the only thing that kept me from getting super depressed and becoming super overweight and going into bad old habits of binge eating and drinking and things like that. Is that I've forced myself to get up every day at a scheduled time, shower, get my clothes on, do a workout, even if it was half hearted, and then just like have some purpose in the day and like not allow myself to, like, when I'd sit down and want to eat gummy candies, I'm like, nope, you're doing this because you feel shitty. So put it down, go for a walk. And like it was wintertime in Canada. So I
Yeah,
would literally go outside and shovel my driveway for some cardio and then shovel it back the other way so that I wouldn't, go into the bad habits of just sitting around and wasting my life. And
yeah,
it lasted for 3 months that I wasn't allowed to work. We had a little bit of assistance I could get personally, but for company wise, there was no help for a small business. So I at least asked my landlords on both places if I could pay, if there was any possibility to pay a little bit less rent. And like thankfully they were all very good and gave a discount, and but I was still responsible for all my bills. So luckily I was smart with how I had done my finances that I could manage to just like get by. So it drastically changed everything. It really made me hone into the things that were good for me, like for fitness wise, mindset wise, and like being really aware of what my triggers were. And then when I was allowed to go back and practice, I was super grateful that I'm like, I never complained about going back to work ever again. This is like, okay, this is cool. When you're forcibly shut down with no end in sight, it definitely challenges the mindset. So,
I think one of the things that I've heard from a lot of people that's interesting is that even though people were staying at home, they were still getting up and acting as though they were going to work. There was a
yeah.
mentality that they had to maintain. And Canada had some pretty hardcore shutdowns. I know that every place around the world had different levels of it, but every time I talk to people from Canada, they're just like, man, it was crazy.
Yeah. Well, and like luckily I was more remote than I am now. I was in a
Yeah,
little tiny town called Grand Prairie. So it's like 78,000 people. So it was a lot more of a smaller issue for us
yeah,
because we're a smaller population. So we didn't have the crazy strict lockdowns of you could only go so far from home or different things like that. So luckily, when the restrictions were put in place, they weren't as militant as other places around Canada, like the really big cities and different
yeah,
things like that. It wasn't as wild.
yeah.
So,
Yeah. So let's get to the heart and soul of what you do right now in 2024. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of third graders. It's career day.
excellent.
And one of the kids says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" What's your answer?
I teach people how to live their best life. We work
Okay.
on what they think. We train them how to use their body and how to properly look at what you put in your body for food and content to find where you're holding yourself back and show you how you can overcome that and actually build a wonderful life through choices.
So what did you want to be in the third grade? What was your dream?
I wanted to be a forensic psychologist.
Wow. Did you
Yeah.
pursue it?
To a degree, I started off in psychology and then I did massage therapy. And I love people. They're so interesting. I love the anatomy puzzles of people and putting their habits together as to how their bodies showed their habits to me, because your body always tattles on you,
Yeah.
even if you don't. But I've always wanted to be interested in people's minds.
But the psychology of things has to lend very well to what you're doing. I mean, that's all that it is. Just like you said, I'm not going to sit around and eat the gummy bears. The psychology of it says, oh, it's okay. The world shut down. We need a little time, but you have to kind of ram up against that. So I would think knowing how behaviors in the human mind work would be key to what you're doing.
Absolutely. And it's like putting that correlation together for people that it's like, okay, you can definitely tell me a lie that you're not following, like you're following your program, but you can never lie to yourself. Like even when you try to, your body fights against it and your mind will always show it and it always shows up in your eyes.
Yeah.
So when I'm watching people and how they check in for the stuff that we have them do, I can pick up their patterns pretty quickly and then help them see themselves in a non judgmental light of this is what you're showing me. Are you aware of it?
So take me back to your childhood, where you were born and raised, and the seeds that were planted into you to not only get into psychology, but to get to a point where you're helping people live a healthier life and have a better mentality and mindset. How did all of that evolve into you today?
So I was born in a little small town, Grand Prairie, and I grew up 20 minutes outside of that in a little tiny bedroom community called Wembley, Alberta. Um, I have a mom, dad, and two sisters, one older, one younger. And my parents were from the generation that you didn't talk about your emotions. They didn't really have an emotional awareness of how to properly deal with them. My mom came from an abusive background for her childhood, and my dad's dad was in the Air Force, so like very militant. So my parents were the lessons that I got from them were ways of like maybe what not to do. Like I had to figure out what emotions were and how to properly navigate them as I grew up because there wasn't really this awareness of, okay, if a kid is frustrated, you help them with their big emotions. It's like, no, go to your room until you can calm down and come out and be a good girl.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of those molding things. And I learned how to be a people pleaser because I didn't want to set anybody off because it wasn't always peaceful in the house.
Yeah.
And so that definitely geared me towards being really interested in how people function because from a young age, I was always reading the room, reading the situations to see how people's emotions were doing without really being aware that this is what I was doing and just like how to navigate it peacefully and create the most peace. Like when my sisters would get in trouble, they would not do their chores, which means everybody got in trouble. So then I would do all their chores and like make sure that everything looked good so that we could have a peaceful evening and nobody was getting yelled at or sent to their room or punished.
Yeah.
And that just like, and I was a ballerina growing up. So I really like the discipline of like having goals and having an outlet creatively. But it also got me really interested in the anatomy of the human body and how things function. So that led me very much to wanting to do psychology, but also really interested in doing massage.
So who's been a hero for you? Who's been an inspiration that's helped you keep your, head straight and to remain positive?
Mostly books, really. Like it was one of those things that because I was so very different than my family, I didn't have support because I was like the outlier. And I couldn't look to that for a source of good knowledge. So I was a voracious reader from a young age. And if I didn't know something, and I like to be a know-it-all, I would go read and find outlets. But really just being curious about everything. And like I'm really a big fan of Betty White because she was able to make a stand in a male dominant industry and like always reinvent herself in a very positive, constructive way without going down the route of like selling her body for gains or different things like that. Because there isn't a huge amount of female um, success stories that don't have an element of that part of it. So it would be pretty much just reading and quotes. And, Betty White's a big driving force for me.
She was quite a chameleon too. She did so many things. I mean, she was a
Yeah.
very diversified pro. Um,
Yeah, and she always grew. Like
yeah,
she never stayed
exactly.
stagnant. She
Uh-huh.
always was challenging herself. And if she couldn't do something yet, she leaned into the yet and would always try so many different things
Yeah.
and had great humor about herself throughout all of it.
Yeah. What was the first book for you that really opened up the doors to you wanting to read more and have this thirst for words?
Oh, I've been reading since I was a kid.
Yeah.
Well, my mom would read us The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe when we were
Yep.
little. And then it was like anything I could get my hands on because for me, a book was an escape from the house. So
Yep.
if I was in my room reading, then I was in my own little world.
Yeah.
But it was definitely The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe started it all. I remember mom reading that to us.
So Betty's not with us anymore, but is there somebody, if you could meet anybody alive on the planet right now that you find fascinating, who would it be? Who'd you love to meet and talk to?
Ooh, that's a good one. Hmm. I'm really curious about Ed Milet because he's
Okay.
got such a vast history of the things that he experienced as a child and like his career of baseball ending and then just the way that he's impacting the world now and like how he tries to leave people better than where he met him. And same with Gary Vee. I
Yeah.
think he's creating such a beautiful impact in the world that I'm really drawn to people who are adding more good without asking for anything in return.
Yeah. So what is it that gets you up every day to do this work that you do? Because you don't just have a job, you have a job that requires you to give of yourself, but you also have to hold back to evolve as a human yourself. What is that collective gumption every day that makes you do that?
Just the idea that there are people out there watching me, that I'm inspiring people that there is better possible. And also that I owe it to myself to see what more I can achieve in my own life. Because even more immediately, I have two stepsons. So I'm showing them that every day we don't know how many days we're going to get. So why would I not give it all today
So what's the best advice you've ever gotten?
to keep going?
Yeah.
No matter what, just keep going.
So of all of the clients that you've worked with, what's one of your favorite success stories? Maybe one that was magnanimous for a certain reason, or it made you grow the most. Is there one example?
There's two. So the magnanimous one is the one where I'm seeing this person evolve. And it's actually one of our clients right now. Just seeing her evolve from like kind of defeated in herself and like really beating herself up for the position that she's in and challenging adversity ahead of her that she needs to face. And then just the fact that she actually asked for some help. But I've actually learned a lot more from the clients that have decided to quit or um, just they allowed themselves to go back into their patterns and they're like, no, I'm done with this. Cause I'm like, okay, well, where did I maybe not serve them well enough? Where was I maybe holding them to too high of a standard that we hadn't quite got that belief into them just yet? Because I feel like I learn more from where I didn't succeed, which allows me to be able to show up better and also reach out to them and be like, you know what? I'm really sorry if there was something that I did that caused you to step away from this so that I can make that repair so that they're not scared to carry on with their next coach so that they can achieve their goals.
So let's say you have a dream tonight. You run into the 18-year-old version of you, and you can give that young version of you a piece of advice based on the life you've lived, the wisdom you've gained along the way. What advice would you impart on that 18-year-old version? And would that version of you listen?
I would hope she would listen, although she was pretty stubborn. Um, and I would impart that everything you're about to experience is building you into exactly who you need to be.
So what are you the proudest of everything you've done and accomplished and become in your life? What is it that you're the proudest of?
Um, the fact that I changed, the fact that I allowed myself to think bigger in my life, because I very much spent the first 30 years of my life thinking very small, trying to fit into somebody else's idea of what a good, successful woman was. That I've allowed myself the space to show up with curiosity and know that as long as I do the work and put in a good effort and come from good intention, that this will keep building and expanding and having impact.
So let's say we get off the call here, time machine pulls out. You can
Yeah.
go anywhere in the history of time and see one event with your own eyes. Where are you going?
Ooh, I would probably go. Where would I go? There's so many places I would want to go.
It's that Back to the Future moment that turns on you. You're like, what? There's so much. It's like the beginning of the Big Bang show. It's like every event in human history flying at you.
Yeah, it's one of those. It's like which part of my brain wants to go where,
Right, right.
right? It's
Yeah.
just like I don't know, like the Monument of the Hindenburg would be a really interesting thing to see, or like Newton with the apple falling on his head to
Yeah,
see like what does he do when that happens? Like how did that thought process go?
yeah,
Because there's so many things that come from that one little thing that seems meaningless, but then has huge impact on where we are today.
yeah. Changes the world. So at the
Yeah.
end of the day, everyone out there has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, colleagues, but you run the show. What's
Yeah.
your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I think I'm probably funnier than I really am. And I am a big open-hearted person. I tend to care too much and give too much to people because I just have such love to give. And that's always bit me in the butt because I can be very overwhelming because I want more for everybody. I want to make them better
Yeah.
than what I when I find them. Even if they're in an amazing place, I just want to add. So I can be very over the top that way.
So for anyone out there that wants that help, they want to reach out, they want to hire you, where's the best place? Any of the good business, where do they go?
Instagram is where we are the most active. We are on all the platforms, but Instagram, you'll get myself or my husband. We are in the company together. We'll be the people directly texting you back when you send us a message or you comment or anything like that. But yeah, Instagram every day. We are show you our wake up time, our habits, the life on the farm with the kiddos, and everything we do apart from being coaches.
So as we are kind of in this Olympic time of our existence right now, everybody has a certain dose of country pride. What's the
Yeah.
greatest thing about being a Canadian?
Oh, it is the fact that I don't know, it's changed a lot. We are loving, we're kind, we are very stubborn, especially in the northern Alberta. We're very stubborn in the fact that, we want everybody to feel included.
Yeah. This has been wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for your story. Thank you for your time. Keep doing the great work. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Joe. I appreciate your time as well.
You bet. Take care.